There's a lot of steps in our review process, and we're going to want to make sure each one of those steps is carried out. For that, we can use the spy functionality from Sinon-JS. So to install it, I'm going to use npm, just npm install Sinon, and then I'm going to save this as a developer dependency. Trying to explain how Sinon works can be a little difficult, so I found that the easiest thing is to just show it. So let's do that. Here, I'll just require Sinon straight away, right at the very top. I want to use the spy functionality. In other words, I want to know if something is fired on a particular object. For this, all I've got to do is to create a spy. For that, I'll just create a variable called spy, and then I'll tell Sinon to spy on my valid app object. And then as a string here, I'm going to say spy on email is valid. So let's put all of that information up here at the very, very top. These are just variables that we want to use below in our before function. So here I am spying on our email validator and everything is working. That's good. We didn't get any exceptions. Now let's see if the spy is actually going to work. Here I'll just assert that the spy was called. This means the email is valid method was called on valid app. There it is. So I declare the spy above saying sinon.spy on our valid app object and make sure that email is valid is called. Down below in the review process, it is in fact called. So everything works. Great, things are working. So let's go and add another assertion here. And this way I can be sure that a review process indeed validates email just by making sure that that spy was called. Let's rerun our test. Hooray! We have a nice new assertion. Well, I don't need to use spy.called here in my assertion. I can use a little bit of syntax goodness given to us by Sinon. When you tell Sinon to spy on something, it will actually wrap that object and its functions. So you can interrogate those functions. As you see here, I could just write validapp.emailIsValid.called, and it will tell me if that function was called. Spying on our valid app object doesn't make all that much sense. What I'd rather do is I'd rather spy on the review process itself. As I mentioned, there's lots of steps in this process, and I want to make sure each one of those steps goes off. So let's change things around. Here, I'll put the instance of the review process in the spy. And then, having a look at our event path, let's just start with the very first one. Ensure app valid. Let's make sure that that is called. So, as you just saw, this should just work. Because it is being called, we know that. We're getting success back. So down below, I'll just say review.ensureAppValid is called. And boom. Well, what is happening here? Well, this can cause a lot of problems. We are getting back false. In other words, Sinon's spy is telling us, nope, it is not being called. And the simple reason is because I'm using events. For some reason, it doesn't work that way with Sinon. You have to have a process that is calling a function directly. It can't be the result of an event trigger. Now, I don't know why that is, but if you're using events like I am, you have to do things a bit differently. So here, all I got to do is I have to wire up something that happens when validated is called on my review object. In this case, I'm going to call spy directly, and I'm going to get in trouble for it. This is just something you have to know about responding to events. You don't want to actually invoke the method you want to use or the function. You simply want to specify this is the function to be called, and you leave that to the event emitter to do it. All right, well, let's try it again. And still getting problems. Well, now down below here, I have to change this to spy.called because our object isn't wrapped. Oh boy. There we go. This works. And that's how you work with events in Sinon spy. It doesn't feel very good, but let's continue on here. I want to spy on each one of these events. So what I'll do is I will just wire up a bunch of spies. And there you are. So every time the review fires each one of those events, I'm going to call spy. So how do I make sure that all of these are called? Well, one thing I can do is I can change spy.called to call count and do an assert.equals. So I want to make sure that that spy was called, let's say 4 times. That's it. And above, should be called 4 times because 4 events go off. And that works. But as you're probably sensing, that's not the ideal situation here. While it's nice that it ensures that it's valid, it doesn't tell us which one is firing, and if one of them's not, then we wouldn't really know. So let's create individual spies for each one. We have a validation spy, mission spy, role available spy, and so on. Now I just create new assertions for each one of those spies to make sure that they are called, and that's all I need to know. And if they are called and everything returns successfully above, and my first assertion returns success, well, then I know that each one of my validators is being fired and everything is working as I expect. Let's try it. It works.